August 13, 2018, 1:40 p.m. Two police officers arrive at 2825 Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado. A pregnant woman and her two daughters are missing. All their belongings are still in the house. Phone, purse, medication, car keys, everything. The husband seems nervous. He's touching his neck, avoiding eye contact. His story doesn't add up. The officers document everything. They note the suspicious behavior. They file their report. And then they let him walk away. 48 hours later, Shannon Watts and her daughters Bella and Celeste are found dead, murdered by the man those officers let go. This isn't a story about a killer. It's a story about a system that failed to stop him. Before we talk about what the system missed, we need to understand who Chris Watts was. On the surface, the perfect family man. Married to Shannon for 8 years. 2 beautiful daughters. 3rd child on the way. Active on social media. Smiling in every photo. But beneath that facade was something far darker. Chris Watts was what psychologists call a family annihilator. A specific type of killer who murders their entire family and often attempts to start a new life immediately after. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has studied these cases for decades. And they've identified a pattern. Family annihilators don't snap. They plan. They calculate. They wait for the right moment. Chris Watts had been planning this for weeks. In late July 2018, he began an affair with a co-worker named Nikki Kessinger. He told her he was separated. He told her his divorce was almost final. He told her he was ready to start fresh. None of it was true. But here's what matters. Chris Watts saw his family as an obstacle. Not people. Not his wife and children. An obstacle to the life he wanted. And on August 13th, he decided to remove that obstacle. Family annihilators share specific psychological traits. And Chris Watts checked every single box. First, narcissistic personality structure. They see their family as extensions of themselves, not independent people. When the family no longer serves their self-image, they become disposable. Second, extreme conflict avoidance. They can't handle confrontation, so they eliminate the source of conflict entirely. Divorce means admitting failure. Murder means starting over. Third, compartmentalization. They separate their actions from their emotions. Chris Watts could murder his family at 5 a.m. and text his mistress by 6 a.m. without showing any emotional distress. Fourth, impression management. They're obsessed with how others perceive them. Chris Watts went on TV pleading for his family's safe return while knowing exactly where their bodies were. The research is clear. These killers don't act impulsively. They plan meticulously. Chris Watts searched how to get away with murder weeks before the killings. He researched burial sites. He calculated drive times to remote locations. He rehearsed his alibi. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated execution. And here's what makes this case so devastating. The warning signs were everywhere. In the weeks before the murders, Chris became emotionally distant. He stopped wearing his wedding ring. He lost weight rapidly, classic sign of affair-related stress. He became irritable with the children. He started working out obsessively. He withdrew from family activities. Shannon noticed. She texted friends about it. She confronted him. She even suspected an affair. But she never imagined he was capable of murder. Because family annihilators are masters of deception. Studies show that 89% of family annihilator victims never saw it coming. They reported marital problems, sure. But murder? Unthinkable. And that's exactly what Chris Watts counted on. On August 12th, Shannon returned from a business trip. She was 15 weeks pregnant. She was exhausted. She wanted to talk about their marriage. Instead, Chris Watts strangled her in their bedroom. Then he smothered 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. He loaded their bodies into his truck. He drove 45 minutes to a remote oil site. He buried Shannon in a shallow grave and stuffed his daughters into oil tanks. And then he went to work like it was a normal day. This is who Chris Watts was. A calculated, remorseless killer who saw murder as a solution to inconvenience. But here's the critical question. Could the system have stopped him? The answer is yes. And here's exactly where it failed. Now, let's talk about a dangerous myth in police culture. One that didn't directly apply here, but shapes how missing persons cases are handled nationwide. You've probably heard it. Police won't take a missing persons report until someone's been gone 24 hours. That's false. There is number 24-hour rule. The FBI explicitly states that law enforcement should accept missing persons reports immediately, especially for vulnerable populations. But the myth persists in police culture. And while officers did respond to Nichols' 911 call the same day, number 24-hour wait, the response revealed a different systemic failure: lack of urgency. Here's the timeline. 12:10 p.m. Nichols calls 911. 1:40 p.m. Officers arrive at 2825 Saratoga Trail. That's a 90-minute delay for a welfare check on a pregnant woman with 2 small children. Now, to be fair, officers responded. They didn't invoke a 24-hour waiting period. But here's what they did do. They treated it like a routine welfare check instead of a potential emergency. And by the time they knocked on that door, Chris Watts had already disposed of the bodies. Truck left at 5:27 a.m. per security footage. Cleaned the crime scene. Rehearsed his story. Would immediate response have saved Shanann and her daughters? Probably not. They were likely already dead by the time Nichols called. But faster response with proper urgency would have caught Chris Watts before he could contaminate evidence, establish his alibi, play the concerned husband on national television. The system's first failure wasn't a 24-hour rule. It was treating this as routine when every indicator screamed high risk. When officers arrived at 2825 Saratoga Trail, they found a textbook high-risk missing persons case. Pregnant woman missing, 2 young children missing, all personal belongings left behind. Phone, purse, medication, car keys, wedding ring, car and driveway, no signs of planned departure, missed important doctor appointment, completely out of character behavior. Every single one of these is a red flag. Combined, it's a screaming alarm. But here's what the officers didn't do. They didn't use a risk assessment protocol. Most police departments have missing persons risk assessment tools. They're protocols that evaluate specific vulnerability indicators to determine response urgency. The National Crime Information Center, the FBI's central database, categorizes missing persons into 5 federal entry types. EMD, disability, physical or mental impairment; EME, endangered due to circumstances; EMI, involuntary abducted or removed against will; EMJ, juvenile under 18 years old; EMV, catastrophe victim, disaster-related disappearance. Most departments use a 4-tier risk assessment system. No apparent risk. Adult with history of leaving, no vulnerability factors, low risk. Minimal concern, routine follow-up within 24 to 48 hours, medium risk. Some concern, active investigation within 12 to 24 hours, high risk. Immediate threat to life, detective-level response within 2 hours. High-risk indicators include vulnerable due to age, pregnancy, or medical condition; dependent children involved; out-of-character behavior; all personal belongings left behind; history of domestic abuse; suspicious circumstances at scene. Let's apply this to Shanann Watts. Vulnerable person, 15 weeks pregnant, high risk; 2 dependent children also missing. High risk, all belongings left behind; phone, purse, medication, car keys, wedding ring; high risk, completely out of character. High risk, car and driveway, no signs of planned departure. High risk, missed critical doctor appointment. High risk. Every single metric screams high risk. Frederick Police Department either didn't have this protocol, or didn't use it. Instead, officers treated this as a standard welfare check. They documented the scene. They interviewed Chris Watts. They filed a report. And then they left. This is the second system failure: inadequate risk assessment. If Frederick PD had properly assessed risk level, detectives would have been on scene within 2 hours. They would have interviewed Chris Watts with trained interrogation techniques. They would have noticed the deception indicators. They would have pursued warrants immediately. Instead, Chris Watts was treated as a cooperative witness, not a suspect. And that brings us to the third failure. Let's watch the body cam footage from August 13th. I need you to watch Chris Watts' behavior, but here's what's important. I'm not asking you to play armchair psychologist. Deception detection is complex. Individual behaviors mean nothing in isolation. But research shows that when multiple indicators cluster together, they warrant investigative attention. Research on deception indicators shows that liars often display clusters of behaviors. Cognitive load indicators: lying requires mental effort. Decreased hand gestures. Longer response latency. Simplified language patterns. Increased speech errors. Emotional leakage, suppressing genuine emotion. Microexpressions of fear or contempt. Inappropriate effect, smiling when discussing tragedy. Lack of emotional congruence. Behavioral control, overcompensating. Rigid posture. Reduced spontaneous movement. Rehearsed sounding responses. Too much detail about alibis. The officers on scene weren't trained in interrogation techniques. They accepted Chris's story at face value. They didn't probe inconsistencies. They didn't separate him from the scene for formal questioning. This is the third system failure. No behavioral analysis training. Chris Watts walked away from that initial contact still in control of the narrative. Still able to dispose of evidence. Still able to rehearse his story for the media. And by the time detectives finally took over the case, critical hours had been lost. He volunteered just enough information to seem helpful. He expressed concern without showing genuine emotion. He created an alibi while officers watched. And they let him do it. Now here's the critical point. This isn't the officer's fault. It's a training failure. Research from the Criminal Justice Center shows that deception detection training for law enforcement is severely inadequate. When it exists at all, it's typically a single brief session, insufficient for meaningful skill development. Most departments focus on legal procedures, use of force and report writing. Behavioral analysis? Interrogation techniques? Reserved for detectives, not the patrol officers who respond first. Deception detection? Not in the curriculum. The FBI offers behavioral analysis training through their National Academy. But it's reserved for senior investigators and detectives. Patrol officers, the first responders to cases like this, get nothing. This needs to change. And we'll talk about how in a moment. But first, there's a fourth failure. Lack of integrated investigation systems. And it's the most damaging of all. August 13th evening. Chris Watts is at the police station for a voluntary interview. Detectives are starting to suspect him. His story has inconsistencies. His behavior is off. They need more information. So they run his background. They check for prior domestic incidents. They look for red flags. And they find nothing. No arrests. No restraining orders. No documented domestic violence calls. On paper, Chris Watts looked like a model citizen. Case closed? Not even close. Because here's what the detectives didn't know. In the weeks and months before her disappearance, Shanann had confided in friends about their marriage struggles. Text messages later recovered showed her concerns about Chris's emotional distance and personality changes. But none of that was in any police database. No system existed to flag escalating domestic risk based on private communications, social media posts, or friend observations. Police departments operate in silos. Patrol reports don't automatically flag to detectives. Social services records aren't accessible. Family court documents aren't integrated. Mental health crisis calls aren't tracked. Critical information exists, but it's scattered across disconnected systems. Let's look at what information was actually available on August 13th. In Shanann's phone, seized later. Text messages documenting marital problems. Concerns about Chris's behavior. Suspicions about an affair. Financial stress discussions. In Chris's work records, never checked initially. Relationship with Nikki Kessinger. Changes in work schedule. Access to remote oil sites. Company truck GPS data. In financial records, not accessed until after confession. Unusual spending patterns. Secret credit card. Payments to Nikki Kessinger. Attempts to sell the house. In phone records, required warrant to access. 111 minutes of calls with Nikki on August 8th. Deleted text messages. Location data showing trips to oil site. All of this information existed. None of it was integrated. None of it was immediately accessible to investigators. Compare this to how modern systems should work. The UK's Police National Computer integrates criminal records, missing persons reports, domestic incident logs, mental health crisis calls, family court orders, social services flags. When an officer responds to a call, they have instant access to the complete history. They can see patterns. They can assess risk accurately. Frederick police had none of this. They were investigating blind, making decisions without critical context, treating each interaction as isolated rather than part of a pattern. And Chris Watts exploited every gap. He knew they couldn't access his phone without a warrant. He knew his affair wasn't documented anywhere. He knew his work records weren't flagged. He knew the system's blind spots. And he used them to buy time. August 14, 2018. Day 2 of the investigation. Detectives now suspect Chris Watts. His story doesn't add up. His behavior is suspicious. They need evidence. So they apply for search warrants. And then they wait. This is the fifth system failure. Delayed warrant execution. In Colorado, search warrants require probable cause affidavit, judge review and signature, execution within specified time frame. The process typically takes 24 to 48 hours. But here's the problem. In a potential homicide, every hour matters. While detectives waited for warrants, Chris Watts had time to clean evidence. He had time to coordinate his story. He had time to dispose of additional evidence. He had time to manipulate his mistress. The system gave him a 48-hour head start. Now let's be clear, warrants exist for good reason. Fourth Amendment protections are critical. We don't want police searching homes without judicial oversight. But the system needs to move faster in high-risk cases. Compare Colorado's process to other jurisdictions. Arizona's telephonic warrant system. Detective calls judge directly. Presents probable cause verbally. Judge issues warrant by phone. Entire process, 2 to 4 hours. Florida's emergency warrant protocol. For cases involving imminent danger. Expedited judicial review. Can be issued within 1 hour. Requires higher probable cause standard. Texas's on-call judge system. Judges rotate on-call duty. Available 24/7 for urgent warrants. Average processing time, 3 hours. Colorado had none of these systems in 2018. Detectives had to write detailed affidavit, 4 to 6 hours. Submit to prosecutor for review, 2 to 4 hours. Wait for judge availability, 12 to 24 hours. Get signature during business hours. Total time, 24 to 48 hours minimum. By the time warrants were executed on August 15, Chris Watts had already cleaned the crime scene, washed bedding and clothing, disposed of Shanann's phone, deleted text messages, rehearsed his story dozens of times. The delay didn't prevent his arrest, but it made prosecution harder. Critical evidence was contaminated. Digital evidence was deleted. Physical evidence was cleaned. And all because the system moved too slowly. Now here's what makes this even more frustrating. The technology to move faster already exists. Electronic warrant systems. Video conferencing with judges. Digital signature platforms. 24/7 judicial availability. The tools are there. The system just isn't using them. And that brings us to the final failure. The one that ties everything together. Let's review what happened in the first 48 hours. Patrol officers responded to welfare check. They documented suspicious behavior. They filed a report. Detectives picked up the case the next day. They conducted interviews. They applied for warrants. They waited for judicial approval. They executed warrants 48 hours later. Each step followed protocol. Each agency did their job. But nobody coordinated. This is the sixth and final system failure. Lack of coordinated response protocol. Modern policing requires seamless coordination between patrol officers, detectives, forensics teams, digital evidence specialists, prosecutors, victim advocates, medical examiners. But most departments don't have formal coordination protocols. Instead, cases get passed from unit to unit like a relay race. Information gets lost. Time gets wasted. Opportunities get missed. Here's how a coordinated response should have worked. Hour 1, 12:10 p.m. to 1:10 p.m. 911 call received. Risk assessment conducted. High-risk determination made. Detective notified immediately. Patrol and detective respond together. Hour 2, 1:10 p.m. to 2:10 p.m. Scene secured. Behavioral analysis conducted. Inconsistencies documented. Warrant affidavit begun simultaneously. Hour 3, 2:10 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. Chris Watts interviewed by detective. Deception indicators noted. Probable cause established. Emergency warrant requested. Hour 4, 3:10 p.m. to 4:10 p.m. Warrant approved. Search executed immediately. Evidence secured. Suspect detained. Total time from 911 call to evidence collection, 4 hours. What actually happened? 48 hours. That's a 44-hour delay. 44 hours for evidence to disappear. 4 stories to be coordinated. For a killer to prepare his defense. The system failed because it wasn't designed to move fast. And here's the tragic reality. This isn't unique to the Chris Watts case. These aren't isolated failures. They're systemic problems. And they cost lives. So how do we fix this? Let's start with the easiest change. Reform number 1. Implement mandatory risk assessment protocols nationwide. The solution: adopt a standardized risk assessment tool for all missing persons cases. The UK's model works. Let's use it. 3-tier system. Low risk, routine follow-up within 24 hours. Medium risk, detective-level investigation within 12 hours. High risk, immediate response, full resource deployment. Key indicators for high-risk classification. Vulnerable person, children, elderly, pregnant, disabled. Out-of-character disappearance. Personal belongings left behind. Suspicious circumstances. Domestic conflict history. Mental health concerns. Recent life stressors. Automatic escalation when score exceeds threshold. Implementation. Digital assessment tool on all patrol tablets. Automatic notification to Detective Division. Real-time scoring during initial response. Mandatory documentation in all reports. Cost: $50,000 to $100,000 per department for software integration. Expected outcome: 90% reduction in delayed escalations. Immediate detective involvement in high-risk cases. Better resource allocation. Clear accountability chain. The Sean N. Watts case would have scored 12 out of 8 points. Detectives would have been on scene within 2 hours, not 24. Reform number 2. Mandatory behavioral analysis training for all patrol officers. Here's the reality. Patrol officers are the first point of contact in 95% of criminal investigations. They need the tools to recognize deception. The solution: create a standardized behavioral analysis curriculum for police academies and annual training. Core training modules. Module 1. Baseline behavior recognition, 4 hours. Establishing normal behavior patterns. Identifying stress responses. Cultural considerations and body language. Practice scenarios with video analysis. Module 2. Deception indicators, 4 hours. 7 categories of deceptive behavior. Verbal inconsistencies. Nonverbal cues. Cluster analysis, multiple indicators together. Module 3. Interview techniques, 4 hours. Open-ended questioning. Strategic silence. Confronting inconsistencies. Documentation best practices. Module 4. Practical application, 4 hours. Role-playing exercises. Real case study analysis. Body cam footage review. Scenario-based testing. Total training time: 16 hours initial, 4 hours annual refresher. Cost per officer: $800 to $1,200. But here's the return on investment. Research from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and the Police Executive Research Forum shows that departments implementing structured interview protocols close missing persons cases significantly faster when risk factors are identified early, reduce investigative dead ends through systematic deception detection, decrease civil liability costs from wrongful accusations, improve case clearance rates in time-sensitive investigations according to the National Institute of Justice. Evidence based training programs show cost-benefit ratios of 3 to 1 to 7 to 1. Every dollar invested returns $3 to $7 in prevented costs. The training pays for itself in reduced investigation costs and prevented tragedies. If Frederick Police had these protocols on August 13, Chris Watts would have been a suspect within hours, not days. Reform number 3. Create integrated investigation database systems. This is the most expensive reform. But it's also the most critical. The solution: build a nationwide integrated database that connects criminal records, missing persons reports, domestic incident logs, mental health crisis calls, family court orders, social services reports, protective orders, prior welfare checks. When an officer responds to a call, they see the complete history instantly. Real-world example: the UK's police national computer processes 16 million queries per day. Average response time: 0.3 seconds. What it would have shown for Chris Watts. Shanann's concerns about marriage, if she'd filed any reports. Financial stress indicators. Recent personality changes, if documented. Work schedule changes. Complete timeline of interactions. The technology exists. We just need the political will to implement it. Implementation challenges. Privacy concerns require strict access controls. Data security must prevent unauthorized access. Interagency cooperation requires federal coordination. Cost: estimated $2 to $5 billion nationally. But here's the cost of not doing it. 600K plus missing persons reports annually. Average investigation cost: $10,000 to $50,000. Preventable deaths: unknown but significant. Community trust eroded by system failures. Funding sources: federal grants, DOJ, DHS. State law enforcement budgets. Asset forfeiture funds. Public-private partnerships. Implementation timeline: Year 1 to 2, pilot programs in 10 major cities. Year 3 to 4, statewide rollouts. Year 5 to 7, national integration. Year 8 plus. Continuous improvement. This system would have flagged Chris Watts' behavioral changes, connected the dots between his affair and the missing persons report, and provided detectives with immediate probable cause. Reform number 4. Implement expedited warrant systems for high-risk cases. Under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 41, judges can already issue warrants based on sworn testimony via telephone or video conference. The problem? Implementation varies wildly across jurisdictions. Some counties have 24/7 on-call judges. Others require written affidavits during business hours only. This inconsistency creates dangerous delays in time-sensitive cases. The solution: establish minimum standards for emergency warrant procedures nationwide. Standard warrant process: non-urgent cases, written affidavits, business hours review, 24-48 plus hour processing time. Emergency warrant process: high-risk missing persons, suspected homicides, imminent danger situations, telephonic or video conference presentation, 24/7 judge availability, expedited review within hours. How it would work. Step 1. Detective determines case meets emergency criteria based on specific risk factors. Step 2. Contacts on-duty judge through rotating 24/7 availability system. Step 3. Presents probable cause via secure video conference with contemporaneous recording. Step 4. Judge issues verbal authorization if probable cause is established. Step 5. Written warrant documentation follows within 24 hours per Rule 41 requirements. Proposed safeguards to prevent abuse. Higher probable cause threshold for emergency designation. Mandatory judicial review of emergency warrant decisions within 48 hours. Detailed documentation of why emergency procedures were necessary. Disciplinary consequences for misuse of expedited process. In the Chris Watts case, this could have changed everything. What actually happened? August 13th. Welfare check conducted, inadequate response, Chris allowed to leave. August 14th. Friend Nicole Atkinson continues pushing for investigation. August 15th. Search warrants finally executed, 2 full days after Shanann was reported missing. If standardized emergency protocols had been in place. August 13th, 3 p.m. High-risk indicators trigger emergency warrant request. 5 p.m. On-call judge reviews probable cause via video conference. 6 p.m. Search warrant executed at Watts' residence. Evidence secured within hours instead of days. Suspect detained based on immediate findings. That's a 48-hour difference. 2 full days of preserved evidence. 2 days less time for a killer to cover his tracks. 2 days that could have meant the difference between a confession and a trial. The technology exists. The legal framework exists under Rule 41. What's missing is standardization, a uniform system ensuring that every jurisdiction can respond to high-risk cases with the same urgency. Because in missing persons cases, hours matter. And right now, whether you get an emergency warrant depends more on your zip code than the severity of the situation. August 15, 2018. 11 a.m. Chris Watts fails a polygraph test. Hours later, he confesses to murdering his entire family. He's sentenced to life in prison without parole. 3 consecutive life sentences, plus 84 years. Justice was served. But it came too late. Shanann Watts, Bella and Celeste are gone. And they're never coming back. But their case exposed every crack in our system. Every gap. Every failure. Every missed opportunity. And now we have a choice. We can treat this as another tragic true crime story. Another case to analyze and move on from. Or we can demand change. The 4 reforms I've outlined aren't theoretical. They're practical, proven and implementable. Mandatory risk assessment protocols cost. Low impact, hides behavioral analysis training cost. Moderate impact, transformative integrated investigation databases cost. High impact, revolutionary expedited warrant systems cost. Moderate impact, significant total estimated cost for nationwide implementation. $3 to $7 billion over 10 years. That's roughly $300 to $700 million per year. For context, the U.S. spends $150 billion annually on law enforcement. These reforms represent less than 0.5% of that budget. The cost of inaction? Immeasurable. According to FBI NCIC data, over 600,000 missing persons cases are reported annually in the United States. While most are resolved quickly, thousands involve suspicious circumstances that require immediate, coordinated law enforcement response. Thousands of preventable deaths. Countless families destroyed. We have the knowledge. We have the technology. We have the resources. What we need is the will to change. If you're a law enforcement professional watching this, here's what you can do right now. Request post-certified behavioral analysis training through your department's professional development program. Advocate for integrating FBI NCIC database access into your mobile data terminals. Push for establishing 24/7 on-call judge programs in your jurisdiction for emergency warrant approval if you're a citizen concerned about these issues. Research your state's missing persons protocols and compare them to the reforms outlined in this video. Contact your state legislators specifically about funding integrated law enforcement database systems, attend local police oversight meetings, and ask about risk assessment protocols for domestic violence and missing persons cases if you're a content creator in the true crime space. Shift your focus from individual perpetrators to systemic failures that enable them. Interview law enforcement reform advocates, behavioral analysts, and policy experts. Use your platform to pressure police departments for transparency about their missing persons investigation protocols, because the next Chris Watts is out there right now. The next Sean N. Watts is texting her friends about her troubled marriage. The next welfare check is being called in. And the system that failed in 2018 is still failing today. Unless we change it. This is the hidden complex. We don't just tell you what happened. We tell you why it happened and how to stop it from happening again. If this video made you think differently about true crime, hit that subscribe button. Because we're just getting started. And if you want to dive deeper into criminal psychology and system reforms, check out the video appearing on your screen right now. Thanks for watching. And remember, understanding the system is the first step to changing it.